April 8th, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. Thatcher Donovan's hands trembled on the control stick of his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. 23 years old, farm boy from Oklahoma who'd spent his life fixing tractors, not flying them into combat. 87 training hours in type. 0 combat missions completed. Today, that number would change. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his cockpit, he watched the uneven formations of the 56th Fighter Group climb laboriously toward the thin air where German fighters waited. 16 P-47C, Thunderbolts, barrel-shaped fuselages, greenhouse canopies that made them look like flying greenhouses, wings that seemed too small for their massive bodies. Each aircraft weighed 13,500 pounds, fully loaded, each one built around a Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine, 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows, 2,000 horsepower, 8 Browning M, 2 machine guns mounted in the wings, 50 caliber, 3,400 rounds of ammunition loaded and ready. The intercepted German radio transmission crackled in Thatcher's headset. A voice, confident, amused, speaking in accented English for the Americans to hear. "They have sent us flying milk bottles." Laughter followed, cold, professional. The laughter of men who had been killing in the skies since Poland fell in 1939. Thatch recognized the voice from intelligence briefings. Major Dieter von Brandt, Jagdgeschwader 26, 4 years of combat experience, 73 confirmed victories. A man who flew the sleek Focke-Wulf 190 like it was an extension of his body. Fliegende Milchflaschen. Von Brandt continued in German, then switched to English, making sure the Americans understood. Fat, slow, pregnant cows pretending to be fighters. More laughter rippled through the German formation, circling high above like wolves watching prey. Thatcher's wingman, Lieutenant Danny Rivers, keyed his radio. 21 years old from Texas, the closest thing to a friend Thatch had in this war. Ignore 'em, Thatch. They'll eat those words. But Thatch couldn't ignore it. The mockery burned in his chest. And worse, the Germans were right. The P-47 couldn't turn with their fighters, couldn't climb like them. At this altitude, the Thunderbolt felt like flying a truck with wings. Heavy, sluggish, wrong. He thought of the letter in his jacket pocket. From Evelyn Hartwell. Eve. The girl back home who believed he was brave, who wrote about wedding plans and the farm they would buy after the war, who had no idea that her hero spent every night before missions vomiting from fear. The German fighters appeared suddenly. 16 Focke-Wulf 190s, diving from the sun, sleek, fast, predatory, everything the P-47 wasn't. Colonel Hubert Hubb, Zemke's voice cut through the radio static. Calm, measured. The voice of a man who had survived 23 bomber missions before transitioning to fighters. "Contact high, 6 o'clock, break right on my mark." Thatcher's mind went blank. The Focke-Wulfs came down like hammers from heaven. 30mm cannons opened fire. 20mm cannons joined them. The sky filled with tracer rounds. Red, orange, white, beautiful and terrible. Danny's voice, screaming now. "Break right, Thatch, break right." Thatch froze. A Focke-Wulf flashed past his canopy, so close he could see the pilot's face. Young, focused, efficient. The German rolled inverted and pulled through positioning for a killing shot. Cannon fire walked across the formation. Lieutenant Mitchell's P-47 took a direct hit. The canopy exploded. The plane rolled left and began its death spiral toward the French countryside below. Thatch move. Instinct overrode paralysis. Thatch shoved the stick forward. The P-47 dove. Not a tactical maneuver, not boom and zoom, just panic, pure survival instinct. The Pratt and Whitney R2800 roared, 18 cylinders, 2,000 horsepower. The airspeed indicator needle climbed, 280 miles per hour, 300, 320. The Thunderbolt's massive weight became an advantage in the dive. Nothing could catch it going down. Thatch pulled out at 15,000 feet, alone, separated from his formation, lost. Behind him the radios filled with chaos. Americans calling for help. Germans coordinating kills. The clinical efficiency of aerial slaughter. Danny's voice cut through the noise. Desperate. "They're on me, Thatch. Where are you, Thatch?" Static. Silence. Thatch flew alone toward England. 30 minutes that felt like 30 years. The radios eventually went quiet. He didn't know if that meant the battle was over or if everyone was dead. He landed at Horsham Street. Faith as the sun touched the horizon. The base of the 56th Fighter Group. The ground crew counted the returning aircraft. 12 P-47s, 4 missing, 4 pilots gone. Danny Rivers among them. 0 German aircraft confirmed destroyed. Thatch climbed out of his cockpit on shaking legs. His flight suit was soaked with sweat despite the freezing altitude. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. He walked 20 feet from his aircraft and vomited into the grass. Master Sergeant Roy Mackenzie, the crew chief, watched in silence. 52 years old, veteran of the Great War, he'd seen shell shock before. He said nothing, just handed Thatch a canteen of water. Colonel Hubert Zemke appeared in the fading light. Tall, lean, 35 years old, but his eyes looked older. He'd lost men before, would lose more, but each one mattered. Thatch straightened, prepared for the court-martial, for the accusations of cowardice, for the shame he deserved. Zemke studied him for a long moment. "You ran?" "Yes, sir." "You're alive?" "Yes, sir." Zemke nodded slowly. His voice when he spoke was quiet, almost gentle. "We've lost 18 pilots in training accidents since September. The P-47 has killed more Americans than Germans so far. It ground loops on landing, torque rolls on takeoff, dives so enthusiastically that pilots black out from compression." He paused. "Fear saved your life today, Lieutenant. Fear is honest. Running is sometimes smart." Thatch looked up, confused. "Tomorrow," Zemke continued, "you'll fly again. And the day after that. Your mission right now isn't to kill Germans. Your mission is to survive long enough to learn how this aircraft actually fights. Because it doesn't fight like a Spitfire, it doesn't fight like a Messerschmitt. It fights like something the Germans have never seen before. We just haven't figured out what that is yet. Sir, I left my wingman. I left Danny. Danny Rivers is missing, probably dead. That's war, Lieutenant. You'll lose friends. You'll lose wingmen. You'll lose men whose names you don't even know. But you won't help them by dying too." Zemke's voice hardened slightly. 10 missions. Survive 10 missions. Then we'll talk about making you a killer. The colonel walked away into the gathering darkness. Thatch stood alone in the English twilight. The smell of high-octane fuel and oil hung in the air. Somewhere in the distance, ground crews were already preparing aircraft for tomorrow's mission. The war didn't pause for grief. He thought about Danny's last transmission, the terror in his friend's voice, the silence that followed. He thought about Eve's letter, about lies he'd written back, about bravery he didn't possess. He thought about von Brandt's laughter. Fliegende Milchflaschen. Flying milk bottles. April faded into May. The slaughter continued. Thatch flew his second mission on April 15th, third on April 20th, fourth on April 25th, 5th, 6th, 7th through the end of the month. Each time the Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts danced circles around the heavy Thunderbolts. Each time Americans died. Each time Thatch survived through a combination of luck, fear, and the P-47's single advantage: it could dive faster than anything in the sky. The 56th Fighter Group's statistics told a grim story. 14 P-47s lost. 3 German aircraft confirmed destroyed. The Royal Air Force pilots at neighboring bases made jokes. Quiet suggestions that the Americans might want to trade their trucks for proper fighters, Spitfires, real aircraft that could actually fight. Thatch stopped writing to Eve. He didn't know what to say. How to explain that he flew through combat every few days but had never fired his guns at an enemy aircraft. How to describe the constant gnawing fear. How to admit that he was a coward in a war that demanded heroes. On May 17th, everything changed. Lieutenant Harrison Stevens landed his P-47 at 1700 hours. The aircraft was barely recognizable. 47 holes. 20mm cannon strikes, 13mm machine gun hits. The left wing had 3 holes large enough to crawl through. The engine cowling was mostly gone. Hydraulic fluid and oil streaked the entire fuselage. But Stevens was alive. The pilot climbed out of the cockpit and collapsed on the wing. Medics rushed forward. He was unwounded, just exhausted, dehydrated, in shock. The German pilot who had attacked him was later identified from radio intercepts. Oberleutnant Werner Schmidt, Jagdgeschwader 2. 61 confirmed victories. He had emptied his entire ammunition load into Stevens's P-47. 480 rounds, 20mm cannons, 13mm machine guns, everything he had. And the Thunderbolt had flown 180 miles back to England. Mackenzie and his crew swarmed over the damaged aircraft. Thatch watched them work as the sun set. The crew chief called out damage assessments. 3 of the 4 main longerons shot through, the structural spine of the fuselage barely holding together. Engine damage to 12 of 18 cylinders. Still ran. Still produced power. Colonel Zemke appeared beside Thatch. Both men stared at the impossible aircraft. Republic Aviation built a tank with wings, Zemke said quietly. Everyone thinks it's a weakness. The weight, the bulk. But look at this. He gestured at the riddled P-47. A Spitfire takes 3 cannon hits and disintegrates. A Messerschmitt loses its coolant system and falls from the sky. But this ugly, fat, pregnant cow absorbed everything a German ace could throw at it and brought its pilot home. Thatch studied the damage, an idea forming, uncertain, fragile. "We're fighting their fight," he said slowly, "trying to turn with them, climb with them, dance with them." Zemke turned to look at him, waiting. "But what if we don't dance?" Thatch continued. "What if we use the weight? Use the dive speed? What if we become something they can't handle instead of trying to be something we're not?" The colonel smiled for the first time since Thatch had known him. "Now you're thinking like a Thunderbolt pilot lieutenant." That night, Thatch sat in the barracks and opened the P-47 technical manual. He studied the specifications he'd memorized but never truly understood. 13,500 pounds loaded weight, maximum dive speed, 550 miles per hour, service ceiling 42,000 feet, 8 M2 Browning machine guns, 3,400 rounds of ammunition, not a dancer, a hammer. He wrote a letter to Eve, the first honest one since deploying. "I've been afraid," he wrote. "Every mission, every takeoff. I thought that made me a coward. But I'm starting to understand something. The plane I fly isn't elegant. It's not pretty. It's not what anyone wanted. But it's strong, and maybe that's enough. Maybe strength matters more than grace when you're trying to survive. He didn't mail the letter. Not yet. He wasn't ready. But he kept it in his jacket pocket, next to his heart. A promise to become the pilot the P-47 deserved. June was coming. And with it, a mission that would transform Thatcher Donovan from a coward into a legend. The mission where he would take 200 bullet holes and refuse to die. The mission where the Germans would stop laughing. June 26th, 1943. 14th hour. 27,000 feet above occupied France. Thatcher Donovan had flown 15 combat missions since April. Still no confirmed kills. But he was alive. Learning. Understanding the machine beneath him in ways he hadn't thought possible. The fear remained. Always. But now it was a tool. Sharp. Focused. Keeping him alert. He carried 2 photographs in his jacket pocket. Eve Hartwell's picture. Smiling. 19 years old when it was taken. Blonde hair pulled back. Eyes that believed in him. The other photo was newer Danny Rivers. His wingman, the friend who hadn't come home from the first mission. Thatch had requested it from Danny's family. A reminder, a debt he couldn't repay, but refused to forget. The mission had been routine. Escort the heavy bombers to their targets, watch for German fighters, return home. The 56th Fighter Group had performed adequately. No losses, no kills, just survival. Thatcher's P-47, designated Lucky Lady, after the Stevens incident flew in the rear of the formation. 48 Thunderbolts returning from escort duty. Engine running smooth. All 8 Browning machine guns loaded. 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, each round weighing nearly 2 ounces, together nearly 900 pounds of potential destruction. He'd been thinking about the proposal letter in his other pocket, written last night, sealed, ready to mail when they landed, asking Eve to marry him when he came home. If he came home. The attack came without warning. 16 Focke-Wulf 190s, diving from the sun at 30,000 feet, led by Major Dieter von Brandt. The same voice that had mocked them on April 8th. The same laugh that had called them flying milk bottles. But this time von Brandt wasn't laughing. His orders crackled across the intercepted German radio frequencies. Clinical, professional, deadly. Concentrate fire! Kill the stragglers first! Thatch saw them coming. 2 seconds before impact. Silhouettes against the sun. Beautiful, terrible, inevitable. He started to turn, started to dive, started to do anything. Too late. The first 20mm cannon shell struck his P-47 at 14:27 hours and 32 seconds. The explosion was sound and light and violence compressed into a microsecond. The plexiglass canopy shattered. Fragments of metal and glass became shrapnel. Thatch felt impacts across his face, his left shoulder, his right arm. Blood. Immediate. Warm. Running down his face into his oxygen mask. The second shell hit the engine cowling, tore it away, exposed the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine to the slipstream. Third shell. Fourth. Fifth. Impacts coming faster than thought. Hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, thick, oily, coating the instruments, the windscreen, everything. The engine coughed, shuddered, kept running. 6th shell, 7th, 8th. Thatch lost count. Time became elastic, stretched, each second containing hours of terror and clarity. His left leg burned, shrapnel, deep, bleeding badly. His right arm was numb. Couldn't feel the stick anymore. Moved it anyway through pure muscle memory. The aircraft shuddered under the impacts. 21 cannon shells in less than 4 seconds, each one containing enough explosive to destroy a small vehicle. each one finding his P-47, punching through aluminum skin, destroying systems, killing the machine piece by piece. Thatch reached for the canopy release. Time to bail out. Time to take his chances in a parachute over occupied France. Better than burning alive at 27,000 feet. The canopy wouldn't move. He pulled harder. Emergency release, the mechanical backup system. Nothing. Understanding hit harder than the shells. A 20mm explosive had detonated in the canopy track, welded it shut, jammed it permanently. He was trapped. 27,000 feet above France, in a dying aircraft, with no way out. The radio was dead, no way to call for help, no way to say goodbye. His vision narrowed. Blood loss. Shock. The oxygen mask was damaged, leaking. Not enough air. This is how I die, he thought, 23 years old. Farm boy from Oklahoma who never kissed the girl he loved, never saw his mother again, never made Danny's sacrifice mean something. The proposal letter in his pocket would burn with him. But the engine kept running. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows. Air-cooled radial design. No liquid coolant system to lose. No radiator to puncture. Just raw mechanical power and American engineering refusing to quit. Thatch couldn't see forward. The windscreen was coated in oil and hydraulic fluid. Opaque. Useless. He looked at the instruments, the ones not destroyed. Compass, altimeter, artificial horizon. The basic tools that had kept pilots alive since the dawn of flight. West. England was west. He pointed the nose west and prayed. The oil pressure gauge was dropping, slowly, inexorably. Eventually the engine would seize. Eventually the bearings would fail. Eventually physics would win. But not yet. Not yet. The P-47 flew on, 26,000 feet, 25,000. Descending slowly. The damaged engine couldn't maintain altitude, but it could maintain airspeed, could keep the propeller turning, could keep generating thrust. Thatch talked to the aircraft. Nonsense. Prayer. Negotiation. Come on, Lucky. Just a little further. England's not far. Take me home, girl, please. Just take me home. His father had taught him to talk to the farm equipment back in Oklahoma. The tractors, the combines. Machines responded to respect, to care, to the voice of someone who needed them. Maybe the P-47 heard him. Or maybe Republic Aviation's engineers had built something that transcended their own understanding, something that could absorb punishment that should have been fatal and somehow keep flying. 200 miles to England, 25 minutes at current airspeed, an eternity. Thatch felt consciousness slipping, blood loss, hypoxia, shock. His vision greyed at the edges. His hands felt distant, disconnected. He bit his tongue, hard. The pain was sharp, immediate, clarifying. Stay awake, stay alive, get home. Behind him, unseen, alone, Focke-Wulf 19, detached from the German formation. Lieutenant Wilhelm Adler, 19 years old, 3 months of combat experience, 0 confirmed victories. The youngest pilot in Jagdgeschwader 26. Von Brandt's orders had been clear. Kill the crippled American. Confirm the destruction. Return to base. Wilhelm positioned his fighter 200 yards behind the struggling P-47. He could see the damage even from this distance. The shattered canopy, the missing engine cowling, the hydraulic fluid streaming back in the slipstream. The aircraft was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. His finger tightened on the trigger. 4 MG151/20 cannons, 20 millimeters, 60 rounds per gun, loaded with Menengeschoss high-explosive shells. Each shell contained more explosive than a hand grenade. He fired. The cannons thundered. Recoil shook the Focke-Wulf. 240 shells left the aircraft in 3 seconds. Bright, burning, trailing smoke. Wilhelm watched the impacts walk across the P-47's fuselage, saw metal shred, saw pieces separate, saw the tail section absorb hit after hit. The American fighter continued flying. Impossible. Wilhelm repositioned. Closer now. 150 yards. Close enough to see the pilot hunched in the cockpit. Close enough to see blood on the shattered canopy. This time he used only his MG-131 machine guns. 13 millimeters, 2 guns. Slower rate of fire but heavier bullets. Better penetration against armor. He fired again. 240 rounds, 4 seconds of sustained fire. The tracers showed him every impact. Engine hits, fuselage hits, wing hits, tail hits. The P-47 shuddered, wobbled, kept flying. Wilhelm pulled alongside, 50 yards, close enough to see everything. The American pilot turned his head. Their eyes met through the destroyed canopy. Wilhelm saw a face covered in blood. Young, probably his own age, eyes wide with terror but still conscious, still fighting, still alive despite everything. The American's hands were locked on the control stick, white-knuckled, desperate. Wilhelm looked at his ammunition counters. Empty. All 4 cannons exhausted. Both machine guns dry. He'd used everything. 480 rounds of ammunition. More than he'd fired in his previous 3 combat missions combined. The P-47 continued flying. Wilhelm had been trained to finish wounded enemies, to confirm kills, to be efficient and professional and lethal. But looking at that bloodied face, he couldn't do it. This wasn't combat anymore. This was execution. The American pilot was already dead. His aircraft was destroyed. He just hadn't crashed yet. Probably wouldn't make it to England. Probably would lose consciousness and spin in over the channel. Let the ocean finish what Wilhelm had started. He shook his head, a gesture the American probably couldn't interpret. Then he raised his hand, a salute, recognition of courage, of determination, of whatever quality kept a man fighting long past the point when fighting made sense. Wilhelm rolled his Focke-Wulf away and headed back to France. His radio call to von Brandt was brief. "Herr Major, I engaged the damaged American. Used all ammunition. He's still flying toward England." Static. Then von Brandt's voice, disbelieving. "You used everything. Jawohl. 240 cannon rounds, 240 machine gun rounds, direct hits confirmed. He's still in the air." Silence. Long enough that Wilhelm thought the radio had failed. Then von Brandt spoke again, quietly, almost to himself. "Was ist das für eine Maschine?" "What kind of machine is this?" Wilhelm had no answer. He landed at his base 30 minutes later, filed his combat report, claimed 1 P-47 probably destroyed, thought about the American's eyes, wondered if he'd made it. Thatch never heard the German fighter leave. His hearing had faded to a dull roar. Engine noise, wind noise, the sound of his own breathing through the damaged oxygen mask. He was alone now, truly alone. 24,000 feet above the English Channel, the French coast falling away behind him. The compass needle pointed west. He followed it. Nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. His left leg had stopped bleeding, or he'd run out of blood. He couldn't tell which. Everything felt distant, cold, unreal. The photographs in his pocket. Eve and Danny. He thought about them, tried to remember their faces, couldn't quite focus. The proposal letter, sealed but never sent. Would they find it in the wreckage, the altimeter unwound? 22,000 feet, 20,000, 18,000. The engine temperature gauge was deep in the red, oil pressure nearly zero. By every law of physics and engineering, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 should have seized, should have frozen, should have failed catastrophically 10 minutes ago. But it kept running, rougher now, shaking the entire airframe, missing on at least 3 cylinders, maybe more, but still producing thrust, still turning the propeller, still keeping the aircraft in the air. Thatch saw the white cliffs of Dover through a gap in the oil-covered windscreen, barely, a smudge of white against the grey Channel waters. England. Home. He keyed the radio. Dead. Tried the emergency hand crank back up. Something clicked. Maybe working. Maybe not. Mayday Manston. Mayday Manston. P-47 heavily damaged. 1 engine. Cannot see forward. Landing gear uncertain. Static. Then a voice. British accent. Calm. Professional. Lucky lady, we have you on radar. You're cleared for any runway. Emergency equipment standing by. Thatch tried to respond. Couldn't form words. Just nodded. Realized they couldn't see him nodding. Roger, he managed. His voice sounded wrong. Weak. The landing gear. Right. He needed to lower the landing gear. He reached for the hydraulic lever. Pulled. Nothing happened. The hydraulic system was destroyed. Fluid gone. Pressure 0. Emergency extension. The mechanical backup. A hand crank system that used cables and pulleys to force the gear down. He cranked. The effort made his vision grey. His wounded leg screamed. His numb arm barely functioned. The gear indicator lights stayed dark. Down or up? He didn't know. Couldn't tell. Manston Airfield appeared below. The emergency runway. Foam trucks already positioned. Ambulances waiting. Thatch lined up on final approach. No forward visibility. Looking through the side window. Guessing at height. At distance. At everything. 170 miles per hour. Faster than normal. The damaged engine couldn't be throttled back. Full power or nothing. The runway rose to meet him. He felt the impact, heard metal screaming against concrete. The belly landing. Gear still up. The P-47 sliding on its fuselage. Sparks. Orange. Bright against the grey English afternoon. The engine chose that moment to fail. Finally. Completely. Catastrophically. 200 miles from where it should have stopped. But it had brought him home first. The aircraft slid 600 feet. Decelerated. Stopped 50 yards short of the foam trucks. Thatch tried to climb out. Couldn't move. His legs wouldn't respond. His arms were dead weight. Hands pulled at him. Americans, British, voices speaking words he couldn't process. They cut the jammed canopy open, lifted him out, laid him on a stretcher. A medic appeared above him, young, efficient. 17 wounds, shrapnel, severe blood loss, possible internal injuries. Get him to surgery now. Thatch's vision tunneled, faded, went black. The last thing he saw was Lucky Lady, his P-47, sitting on the runway, destroyed but somehow whole, dead but somehow still present. The crew descended on the aircraft like surgeons examining a medical impossibility. Master Sergeant Roy Mackenzie led the inspection. He'd worked on aircraft for 30 years, thought he'd seen everything. He was wrong. He started counting the holes. 10, 20, 50, 100. At 150 he stopped using the counter, just used chalk to mark each penetration, each tear, each place where metal had been and now wasn't. The final count was 207. Bullet holes, cannon holes, fragments, damage. 207 ways the aircraft should have fallen from the sky. Mackenzie examined the engine. 12 of 18 cylinders showed direct impact damage. 3 were completely destroyed. The remaining 6 had kept the engine running, kept producing power, kept defying physics. He traced the damage to the fuselage. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone, had been shot through. The aircraft's spine was severed in 3 places. It should have broken apart in mid-air. The armor plate behind the pilot's seat told its own story. 7 cannon strike marks, 20mm impacts. Each one would have killed Thatch if the 3/8-inch steel hadn't held. One strike had come within 2 inches of his head. The metal was compressed, deformed, but unbroken. In the cockpit, Mackenzie found 2 photographs, blood-stained, one of a young woman, the other of a young man in uniform, and a sealed letter, addressed to Miss Evelyn Hartwell, Oklahoma. He cleaned them carefully, put them in an envelope, marked it for Lieutenant Donovan. When Colonel Zemke arrived, Mackenzie showed him the damage in silence. Let the evidence speak. Zemke walked around the aircraft twice, touched the holes, the scars, the impossible survival. "Get me Republic Aviation on the telephone," he said finally. "They need to see this. They built something stronger than they know." Thatch woke 2 days later in the base hospital. White walls, white sheets, the smell of disinfectant and blood. Zemke sat in a chair beside the bed, reading a report. He looked up when Thatch's eyes opened. "Welcome back, Lieutenant." Thatch tried to speak. His throat was raw, dry. Zemke handed him water, waited. "Did I make it?" Thatch managed. "You made it. 207 bullet and cannon holes. Lucky lady is in pieces being studied by every engineer who can get clearance to see her. You're the toughest son of a bitch in the 8th Air Force." "Wilhelm." "What?" "The German pilot. He could have killed me. He ran out of ammunition. He saluted me instead." Zemke nodded slowly. "The war produces strange moments. Honor where it shouldn't exist. I want to fly again." "You will, but not for 3 weeks. Doctor's orders. You lost too much blood. 17 shrapnel wounds, 2 cracked ribs. You need time." Thatch closed his eyes, thought about the 3 weeks while he'd been unconscious, about what the war had done without him. "Eve's photograph, is it?" "Safe. Mackenzie saved it. And the other one, your wingman, right? Danny Rivers, first mission. I ran. He died. And now you survived when you shouldn't have. The war keeps accounts we can't always understand." Zemke stood to leave, paused at the door. "Von Brandt received the intelligence report about your survival. He's requested every detail, studied the photographs of your aircraft. He knows now what we're starting to understand." "What's that, sir?" "That we're not flying Spitfires. We're not trying to outturn the Germans. We built something different. Something that uses weight and power and durability instead of grace. And once we figure out how to fight with those strengths..." Zemke smiled. "The Germans are going to stop laughing." July 1943 brought Thatch back to flight status, but he returned to a different squadron, one that had spent his recovery period learning new tactics under Colonel Zemke's relentless drive. The briefing room was covered with diagrams, charts, mathematics, the physics of aerial combat reduced to equations. "Mass times velocity equals momentum," Zemke explained to the assembled pilots. "The P-47 weighs 13,500 pounds loaded. A Focke-Wulf 190 weighs 9,000. We have a 44% mass advantage. That's not a weakness. That's a weapon." He pointed to altitude charts. "At 30,000 feet, our turbo-supercharged engines produce full-rated power. The German fighters are gasping for air. Their performance degrades. Ours doesn't. We own the high ground." Dive speed calculations next. Terminal velocity in a dive 550 miles per hour. The FW190 maxes out at 425. The BF109 at 450. They cannot catch us going down, and when we zoom back up... He drew the trajectory. We're climbing at 3,000 feet per minute. They can't follow. Thatch studied the numbers, saw the pattern. We don't dogfight, he said slowly. We boom and zoom. Exactly. We climb to 35,000 feet. We wait. When the Germans appear below us, we dive. Faster than they can react, we fire. We zoom back to altitude. They can't chase us up, can't catch us down, can't fight us where we're strongest. One of the newer pilots raised his hand. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, 20 years old. Sir, what about the 8 guns? Everyone says cannons are better. Zemke smiled. Everyone is wrong. Watch. He showed gun camera footage. Recent combat. P-47 versus Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft. The convergence of 8 50 caliber machine guns was visible. A cone of destruction. Every 5th round a tracer showing the pattern. The Messerschmitt 110 didn't fall. It disintegrated. Wings separated from fuselage. Tail severed. The aircraft transformed from flying machine to debris cloud in less than 2 seconds. Cannons have more explosive power per shot, Zemke explained, but limited ammunition, maybe 120 rounds total. The P-47 carries 3,400 rounds. You can fire for 30 seconds continuously. That's not firepower. That's a wall of lead. He showed the mathematics. 8 guns, 750 rounds per minute each, 6,000 rounds per minute total, 100 projectiles per second. At convergence range, they all occupy a 6-foot circle. Nothing survives that. Nothing. Thatch felt something shift inside him. Understanding. Purpose. The fear was still there. But now it had direction. August 17th, 1943. The mission to Schweinfurt and Regensburg. The deepest penetration into Germany attempted to date. The 56th Fighter Group would escort as far as their fuel allowed. Then the bombers would continue alone. Everyone knew it. The losses would be catastrophic. But maybe they could buy some of the bombers enough time. Thatch flew in the lead element. 27 missions now, still 0 confirmed kills, but alive, learning, ready. The German fighters appeared at 13:20 hours. 12 Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft, twin-engine heavy fighters, armed with 30mm cannons and rockets, purpose-built to kill B-17s. They positioned below the bomber stream, preparing to climb, to fire their rockets into the close formations. Zemke's voice on the radio, calm as always. Contact low. Me-110's preparing attack run. We're going in. Follow me down. Thatch pushed the stick forward, the familiar sensation. The P-47's nose dropping, the acceleration building, altitude unwound. 28,000, 24,000, 20,000. The airspeed indicator climbed, 300 miles per hour, 400, 450, 500. The controls stiffened, high-speed compression, the shock waves forming on the wings, the aircraft approaching its limits. Thatch had done this before, in practice, in panic, but never with this purpose, never with this clarity. He was the hammer now. The Germans were the anvil, and between them physics would decide. 16,000 feet. The Me-110s grew in his gun sight. Large, twin-engine, vulnerable from behind. Range 300 yards. Closing. His thumb found the trigger. 8 Browning M2 machine guns, synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. 3,400 rounds loaded and ready. He pressed. The sound was like nothing he'd experienced. Not individual gunshots, a sustained roar, a thunderous drum roll. The recoil shook the entire aircraft. 8 guns firing simultaneously. The P-47's mass absorbing the forces that would have torn apart a lighter fighter. Tracer rounds showed the convergence, orange streaks meeting at a point in space, where the enemy aircraft occupied space. The Messerschmitt 110 came apart, not crashed, not shot down, came apart. The left wing separated at the root. The right engine exploded, the tail section severed. The cockpit area disintegrated into aluminum confetti. One moment an aircraft, the next debris falling toward Earth. Thatch pulled back on the stick. 7G forces, vision graying. But the P-47 could take it. Designed for this, built for this. He zoomed back to 26,000 feet, the dive speed converting to altitude, energy management, physics. Below the remaining Mi-110S scattered, broken formation, survival instinct overriding tactical discipline. Thatch rolled inverted, dove again, found another target, pressed the trigger. Another Messerschmitt died. Faster this time, 2 seconds of fire, total destruction. The radio filled with voices. American pilots discovering what 8 synchronized 50 caliber machine guns could do. They don't just go down, they explode. I just cut one in half, cut it in half. Thatch climbed back to altitude, checked his ammunition counter, fired perhaps 400 rounds, still had 3,000 left. He thought about Danny, about the debt he could never repay. Maybe this was how. One mission at a time, one German fighter at a time. September brought more missions, more combat, more kills. Third victory over Bremen, a Bf-109 that made the mistake of climbing to meet the P-47s at altitude. The Messerschmitt was beautiful, graceful, outmatched. 8 guns spoke. The 109 fell. 4th kill near Münster, October 8th. 5th kill. The 5th kill made him an ace. 5 confirmed victories. Official status, recognition. But when the intelligence officer told him who his 5th victim was, the celebration died. Oberst Heinrich Kessler. 206 confirmed victories. One of Germany's greatest aces. Veteran of Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. A legend. Killed by a 23-year-old farm boy from Oklahoma, who 6 months earlier couldn't hit a target in practice. Thatch didn't celebrate, didn't tell anyone except in the official report. That night, he wrote to Eve. Told her he'd become what the war needed him to be. Didn't say whether that was good or bad. Mailed the proposal letter with it. Asked her to marry him, if she still wanted a killer instead of the farm boy she'd known. October 12th. Bomber escort near Osnabrück. The German formation appeared at 32,000 feet. 20 Focke-Wulf 190s, professional, coordinated, led by a distinctive aircraft with elaborate nose art. Thatch recognized it from intelligence briefings. Von Brandt's personal fighter. The voice on the intercepted radio confirmed it. All fighters, the American with the 200 holes is here. That one is mine. Thatch felt ice in his stomach. Von Brandt knew. Had studied the reports, the photographs. Knew exactly which P-47 he was targeting. This wasn't random combat. This was personal. Von Brandt's Focke-Wulf dove from above. Perfect positioning. Perfect execution. The attack of a man with 4 years of combat experience and 73 kills. Thatch didn't panic. Zemke's training overrode fear. He pushed forward, dove away, but not in panic this time. With purpose, the P-47 accelerated 400 miles per hour, 450, 500. Von Brandt followed. His Focke-Wulf was faster than most German fighters. Could reach 425 in a dive, not fast enough. Thatch pulled out at 8,000 feet, 7G forces. Vision graying but conscious. Then he pulled back more. Zoom climb, speed bleeding off into altitude, 8,000 feet, 12,000, 16,000, 20,000, 24,000, 28,000, 32,000. Von Brandt tried to follow. His Focke-Wulf reached 24,000 feet, the engine temperature critical, oil pressure dropping, the BMW 801 engine gasping in the thin air. He couldn't climb higher. Thatch continued to 35,000 feet, rolled inverted, looked down. Von Brandt was below him now, exactly where Zemke had taught him to want the enemy. Position reversed. Hunter became hunted. Thatch dove. The math was simple. The execution was pure. Range 350 yards. Closing. Von Brandt tried to turn, too slow at this altitude. Thatch pressed the trigger. 1.8 seconds of fire. 180 rounds. Von Brandt's Focke-Wulf exploded. Left wing separated. Engine fire. Tail gone. The canopy blew off. A figure emerged. Parachute deployed. Thatch circled the parachute, his wingman's voice on the radio. Urgent. "Finish him, Thatch. He'd do it to you." Thatch thought about Wilhelm Adler, the German pilot who could have killed him, who chose mercy instead. He waggled his wings. A salute. Then turned west toward England. Below, suspended in the air, Dieter von Brandt watched the P-47 disappear, his Focke-Wulf falling in burning pieces around him. He'd tried to kill the farm boy. The boy had spared him. The war was teaching lessons von Brandt didn't want to learn. January 1944. A new variant arrived, the P-47D-22. On paper, the modifications seemed minor. A new propeller, 13 feet in diameter, paddle-shaped blades, broad chord design, Hamilton standard hydromatic system. In practice, the change was revolutionary. Thatch's first test flight showed 3,000 feet per minute climb rate. He'd expected 2,200. At 10,000 feet, the old P-47 would have been laboring. The new one climbed like it was falling upward. The sound of the new propeller was different too. Deeper, throatier. The blade tips approached supersonic speeds, created shockwaves, a distinctive roar that carried for miles, like distant thunder rolling across the sky. But this thunder brought death. German ground troops could hear it from 10 miles away. Identify P-47s by sound alone before seeing them. The panic it caused had a name in Wehrmacht reports. Donnerschlag, thunderclap, the sound that meant run, hide, pray. By late 1944, Thatch had 24 confirmed aerial victories. The missions changed. Ground attack now. Rockets, bombs. The 8 guns proved equally effective against trucks and tanks. By June 6, 1944, D-Day, Thatch had already completed 91 combat missions and scored 27 confirmed victories. He was on a ship back to the United States, while the 56th Fighter Group flew 3 missions that historic day, claiming 17 kills with no losses. Thatch watched the news from home, knowing he had done his part. 6 months after Thatch returned to Oklahoma, news reached him from Europe. January 1st, 1945. The Luftwaffe's last desperate gamble. Operation Bodenplatte. 900 German fighters launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands at dawn. At one of the 8th Air Force P-47 bases in Belgium, the attack came without warning. Focke-Wulf's strafing parked aircraft at sunrise. 22 P-47s destroyed on the ground. Burning, smoking, gone. A captured German pilot was brought to the command post. Young, defiant. He looked at the burning aircraft and smiled. "What do you think of that American—" One of the American officers appeared beside the German, pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside, preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow morning," he said quietly, "we'll have 40 new ones delivered from England. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" Pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside, preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow morning," Zemke said quietly, We'll have 40 new ones delivered from England. How long will it take you to replace your pilots? The German smile disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40S filled the flight line, flown in from depots. The war machine continuing without pause. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft that day. 213 pilots. Many of them irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. The Americans lost 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields, all replaced within a week. The mathematics of industrial war made brutal sense. America could afford losses. Germany could not. When Thatch heard the news in Oklahoma, he understood. The war he'd fought wasn't about individual courage or skill. It was about numbers, production, replacement. Wilhelm Adler had shown him mercy because he was one German pilot facing one American. America had won because they could replace 10 for every one lost. Industry over artistry, mass over mastery. The lesson stayed with him for 40 years. He married Eve in a small ceremony in Oklahoma, bought the farm they'd talked about, had children, built a life. But part of him never left the sky above Europe, never stopped hearing the 8 guns, never stopped seeing the faces of men whose names he'd refused to learn. For 30 years, he didn't talk about the war. Couldn't. The gap between who he'd been and who he'd become was too wide to bridge with words. Until Phoenix. 1985. The reunion of German and American fighter pilots, former enemies meeting in peace. Thatch had ignored the invitation, thrown it away, wanted nothing to do with memories. Eve found it in the trash, asked him why. "Because I killed them," he said. Simple, honest. "And they tried to kill you," she replied. "Maybe that's why you should go. Maybe you need to see that they survived too." So he went, 65 years old, grey hair, walking with a cane from the shrapnel wounds that never fully healed, wearing a suit that felt wrong, civilian clothes after spending so many years in uniform. The conference hall was full of old men, Americans and Germans, all of them with the same look, the same distant eyes, the same understanding that separated them from everyone else. Thatch stood near the bar, alone, uncomfortable, a voice behind him. German accent. Familiar somehow. "You are Donovan. Lucky lady. The 200 holes." Thatch turned, saw an old man, 73, dignified, grey hair, standing straight despite age. The face was older, but the eyes were the same. The eyes he'd seen through a gun sight 41 years ago. "Von Brandt," Thatch said. Not a question, a recognition. "Dieter, please. The war is long over. Ranks mean nothing now." They studied each other. 2 old men who had tried to kill each other when they were young. "I shot you down," Thatch said. "October 1943. You bailed out. I spared you." "Yes. I have wondered for 41 years why you did that. A German pilot named Wilhelm spared me in June. Seemed fair to return the favor." Dieter nodded slowly. "Wilhelm Adler. He died in 1944, Normandy. His aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire. He crashed near Caen." His voice quieted. He was only 20 years old, still a boy. The information hit harder than Thatch expected. The boy who could have killed him, who chose mercy instead, dead at 20. "I'm sorry," Thatch said. "War is sorry. We were just participants." Dieter gestured to a quiet corner. "May we talk? There are things I have wanted to say for 4 decades." They sat. 2 old men with drinks they didn't touch. Dieter spoke first, his voice quiet, reflective. "We laughed at your P-47s in April 1943. Fliegende Milchflaschen, flying milk bottles, fat, ugly, impossible to take seriously. I remember. I heard you on the radio. Yes, I was arrogant. We all were. 4 years of victories, Poland, France, Britain, Russia. We thought we were unbeatable. You were good, Thatch said. Better trained, more experienced, better aircraft for turning fights. But you didn't fight us. You changed the rules. Boom and zoom, high-altitude dominance, and those 8 guns. Dieter paused. We called them Roosevelt's clavier, Roosevelt's piano. The sound haunted our dreams. I know. Intelligence told us. What intelligence could not tell you was the fear. Real fear. When we heard that sound from miles away, we knew death was coming. Not maybe. Not possibly. Certainly. Your guns did not wound. They destroyed. I saw aircraft literally cut in half. Pilots who survived hits from our cannons died in seconds from your machine guns. Dieter's hands shook slightly. He continued, but it was not just the aircraft. It was what the aircraft represented. American industry. Unlimited production. We shot down 10 P-47s. 20 arrived the next day. We killed experienced pilots. Rookies replaced them immediately. Rookies with 400 hours of training, more than our aces received. We had resources, Thatch said quietly. You had courage. Courage without resources is just delayed defeat. That is what I learned. We were artists painting with fighters. You were a factory producing weapons. Industry won. It always does. Silence settled between them. Comfortable. Understanding. Years of silence broke. Thatch found himself talking. About Danny. About the fear. About the guilt. About coming home to a country that called him a hero when he felt like a survivor. Dieter listened. Understood. Shared his own stories. His own guilt. His own struggle to reconcile the boy he'd been with the man he'd become. When they finally stood to leave, hours had passed. The reunion was ending. Old men preparing to return to their lives. Dieter extended his hand. Thank you, Herr Donovan, for sparing me that day in October, for talking with me today, for understanding what we both carry. Thatch shook his hand, felt something release, not forgiveness, not absolution, just recognition. 2 men who had survived, who carried the weight, who finally found someone who understood. Thank you for surviving, Thatch said, for being here, for making this conversation possible. They parted. Probably would never meet again. But the conversation had mattered, had changed something. The numbers told the story. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47 Thunderbolts during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, 1 aircraft rolled off the line every hour. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots killed in combat against Western Allied forces. Germany could build aircraft, but they couldn't replace the men who flew them. America could do both. The P-47 Thunderbolt sits in the Air Force Museum now, restored, polished, the 200-hole survival story preserved in photographs and placards. Tourists walk past, read the statistics, marvel at the aircraft. They don't understand. Can't understand. Don't know what 850 caliber machine guns sound like when they fire. Don't know what it feels like to survive when you shouldn't. Don't know the weight of 27 victories. The plaque reads simple words. Lieutenant Thatcher Donovan. 27 confirmed victories. 91 combat missions. Survived 200-plus bullet and cannon strikes June 26, 1943. What it doesn't say. He was 23 years old, terrified, lucky, changed forever by what war demanded. What it can't say. that 50 years later he still hears Roosevelt's piano in his dreams, still sees the faces, still carries the weight. The Germans laughed at the P-47 in 1943, called it a flying milk bottle, mocked its size, its weight, its apparent clumsiness. They stopped laughing when the 8 guns spoke, when American industry buried them in steel and lead and unstoppable momentum. They stopped laughing when farm boys like Thatcher Donovan learned to turn fear into fury, weakness into strength, survival into mastery. The Thunderbolt won, not through elegance, through endurance. America won, not through art, through industry. And the men who flew and fought carried the cost for the rest of their lives. Lucky lady, 200 holes, still flying, still surviving, still teaching lessons about strength and sacrifice and the price of victory. The museum closes at sunset. The lights dim. The P-47 sits in shadow, silent now, the guns cold, the engine still, the pilot long gone. But the story remains. Will always remain. The story of the farm boy who wouldn't die, and the plane that refused to quit.